very aware that this has been a difficult year for our postgraduate community. And this is something that came up in our panel discussion. They've had very few chances to present their research, either in progress or research outcomes if they've been close to the end of a master's or PhD. And so we wanted to try and give a platform to our postgraduate researchers, partly because it's a lonely experience. It's lonely doing a master's or particularly a PhD at the best of times, but during COVID, it's been especially lonely. So we've had a couple of opportunities to collaborate together. Our thanks to the Language Testing Research Group at Lancaster for opening up their event to other research graduates. And we decided to give a platform to our PGRs as part of this event, but also to set them a challenge in communicating their research. So we asked them to put together a 3-slide, 3-minute presentation of their research, and we had quite a substantial number of proposals from which we were able to select, post-vetting a limited number within the time frame that we had available. So I'm going to hand over now to Daniel Lamb, who is a colleague at CRELLA and who has kindly prepared this and will run the session.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Lamb from CRELLA. So I'll be hosting the next half hour of our postgraduate presentations. Just to sort of minimize the chance for technical difficulties, we have asked all our 5 presenters to pre-record their presentations. That also gives them a bit of pre-planning and so as to try and ensure that the presentations will run smoothly. If technical difficulties arise, then someone else will help me play their recordings, but otherwise I'll be playing all 5 presentations in a row. And then we will have about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A time. So the way it works is that while the presentations are being played, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box. Karen Dunn will be collecting these questions and selecting them. Hopefully we will have a chance for each presenter to answer at least one question in the Q&A session time. And Karen will be relaying the questions to me, and I'll read the questions out and for our presenters to answer them live. So without further ado, I'll be introducing our first presenter presentation. First of all, I'll be sharing screen. Our first presenter is Emma from CRELLA, and she'll be talking to us about the impact of time allowances in an EAP reading to write assessment.
Hi everyone, it's a real pleasure to share my PhD research on the impact of time allowances in EAP. My mixed method study in...
Start again.
Hi everyone, it's a real pleasure to share my PhD research on the impact of time allowances in EAP writing assessment. Let me briefly explain how the idea came about. I was working in a language centre in a Hong Kong university, and we were using the same multiple trait scoring instrument to evaluate work done in exam conditions and extended out of class conditions. This prompted me to question whether students were behaving the same way in the 2 conditions. Just as I've had to adapt my presentation style and content to fit the 3-minute time allowance today, I was interested to find out how students fared under time pressure. My mixed method study involved the same group of students composing under a 1-hour 45-minute time allowance and a 1-week deadline. You can see from the slide that performance data provided evidence to investigate similarities and differences in terms of essay length, scores, and the frequency of reference types and uses in the 2 conditions. And the self-report data provided students retrospective insights into their composing behaviour. Synthesis of the 2 kinds of data was invaluable to reaching meaningful interpretations and answering the research questions. I'll share an example of how this triangulation of data enabled me to make sense of an unexpected finding, which arose from the quantitative coding of citations. Basically, I found a higher prevalence of unacknowledged paraphrases in the extended condition, and this was especially apparent among the higher scoring students. This is counterintuitive, as students reported that they spent longer on their out-of-class essays and had time to check and revise. It was only through synthesis of the qualitative data that I was able to understand this. Let me share some examples of sound bites from the discourse-based interviews conducted after students had written in the extended condition. The first one shows that the student maximized the abundant time to read the sources again and to process and combine the ideas. The second one shows how the sources were used as a springboard. The student made connections between the source ideas and their existing knowledge base in order to generate new insights. And my favorite one, and this was the highest scoring student, and he's explaining why he didn't provide a reference for his own ideas, which were hiding in his mind and also were in one of the source texts. Comments describe an instinctive approach to composing, involving a meshing together of source and own ideas and a blurring of the boundaries. It seems the extended condition was more conducive to knowledge transformation and discourse synthesis, especially for the higher performers. So the takeaway here is the inadequacy of relying on quantitative coding schemes alone to code source text use, and the importance of gaining personal insights through methods such as the discourse-based interview. What appeared to be transgressive intertextuality from a quantitative coding was actually a developmental and positive step to becoming a competent academic writer who's able to recontextualize source content to construct an argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma. And she's with us live. So if you have questions for her, feel free to post your question in the Q&A box, and we will try to collect the questions. So I'll be sharing screen again, and I'm going to stop my own video. You don't need to see me because I'm not presenting. And I'll just share screen again. Okay. So the second presentation is from Franz, who's based in University of Innsbruck in Austria.
In my PhD, I was interested in the issue of single play and double play in listening assessment. There is quite a bit of inconsistency among testing boards with regards to this issue. Some major testing boards play all of the listening texts in their assessments only once. Others play all of the texts twice. And yet a third group uses a mixture between single play and double play, or gives test takers the choice whether to listen a second time. Most previous studies have only looked at the effects of double play on test scores. But in my research, I also wanted to investigate the effects of double play on how test takers listen. So I was interested in the differences in test takers' response processes between listening tasks completed in single play and double play. So how did I study response processes? I used B2 listening tasks from the Austrian Matura exam, 2 multiple choice and 2 open answer tasks, and administered them to 16 to 18-year-old Austrian school students in single play and double play in a complex counterbalance design. My final dataset consisted of test scores and answer changes from 306 students, questionnaire data on response processes from the same students, as well as stimulated recalls which were prompted by eye movement recordings from 16 additional students. I analyzed the quantitative data by performing bias analysis using RASH, as well as applying classical test theory methods. I also calculated t-tests with corresponding effect sizes. The stimulated recalls were coded according to a coding scheme, which was based on models of listening comprehension from the literature. The recalls were double-coded by a second and third coder, and I inspected intercoder agreement using GWET's AC2. As a final step, I triangulated the different data sources to see to what extent they agreed. So what did I find? Overall, the different data sources agreed in showing that double play has a number of benefits compared to single play. First, my analysis showed that test takers use more higher-order cognitive processes, which are associated with building meaning, in double play compared to single play. Test takers also displayed a greater variety and a greater amount of listening strategic behavior in double play. At the same time, the data clearly showed that students used significantly fewer test-taking strategies in double play, and they were also significantly less anxious. Overall, therefore, I found that double play was beneficial for construct validity. Based on these findings, I questioned the common practice of single play used in many current L2 listening tests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. I have to apologize that there might be a couple of technical issues with my sharing my screen on my computer, which didn't show up in the rehearsal. But this also gives me, or gives you, the opportunity for a very, very short break between presentations, as you will find out that not only is presenting a piece of research in 3 minutes challenging, actually getting to know a piece of research in 3 minutes can be challenging as well. So that gives you a little bit of time of digesting the previous one before we move on to the next one. I will, however, now move on to our third presentation, which is from Judith at UCL. So I'm going to share screen again.
I've worked with raters for almost 20 years and suspected they had different values on what constitutes an on-topic speaking response, and also different values on the importance of a speaking response being on topic, which might be leading to different scoring decisions. The research is available for the writing skill, but I couldn't find any research that specifically dealt with this on-off topic construct for speaking. If I can identify how raters define and measure the on-off topic construct, it might contribute to better training and better rating. If we understand what raters are doing, we can use this information for better automated assessment rating systems. This is why I decided to look into this topic in more detail as a PhD. The data I have collected should answer my research questions, which are to provide insight into the internal criteria raters reportedly use to decide if a speaking response is on or off topic, to determine the extent the task prompts impact on this decision-making, compare these decisions to the criteria in the rating scale, and explore the relationship between the internal criteria and any rater effects, such as leniency, severity, inconsistency, halo effects, and bias. I've collected and I'm analyzing qualitative and quantitative data in a mixed methods design. 30 raters marked 45 test taker responses to a speaking task. I used 3 versions or forms of the task to investigate possible version effects. For quantitative data, I collected 45 CFR scores for each of these responses and 135 on-topic decisions, and analyzed the data using facets. For the qualitative data, I collected 135 reasons for the on-off topic decisions and did thematic analysis using in vivo. I also asked raters to describe how they normally rate this particular task to see if I could find any rater decision-making processes that might be influencing their decisions. I'm just at the beginning of my data analysis, but so far I have found fewer misfits or overfits for the versions compared to the prompts in the quantitative data. For the qualitative data, I've identified a number of initial themes that need further exploring. Raters report internal criteria that believes a response should be a particular length, covers certain areas, have a certain level of clarity, and be in a particular format. They also report different types of evidence for their on-topic decisions, including quotes, interpretations, and inference, and report criteria on how precise the test taker response needs to match the prompt. The next step is to bring the quantitative and qualitative analysis into a final analysis, including the rater marking processes, email exchanges I've had with raters to clarify their perceptions, and a possible confirmatory focus group, in order to see if I can identify criteria for defining and measuring the on-topic construct.
Thank you very much, Judith. And again, she is with us live. So if you have a question for Judith, feel free to post that in the Q&A box, and we will relay the question to Judith later on. Our next presenter is Myriam from Lancaster University, and I'll be sharing her presentation with you in just a second.
Hello, everyone. My name is Myriam, and I know I have a long title, but what can you do? A range of different English language tests are commonly used for university admissions around the world. However, there is little research on the extent to which available tests reflect the communicative demands of academic study in English as a medium of instruction contexts. By this, I mean universities where degree programs are conducted in English, but where English is not an official language within broader society. My study is designed to address this research gap by investigating the validity of two proficiency tests used for admissions at a specific EMI university in a multilingual context. The focus of my research is the American University of Beirut, a multilingual non-English dominant context. It's quite a nice place to study, as you can see. The university uses several international English language proficiency tests for admissions, as well as a locally developed test. My project focuses on the TOEFL IBT and the AUB-EN, which is the in-house test. In my study, I investigate the characteristic of language use at AUB, focusing on listening and speaking, to see how well these characteristics are reflected in TOEFL IBT and AUB-EN. I also explore the perceptions of a range of stakeholders about the fitness of each test for admissions purposes at AUB. So, I observed and video recorded 8 classes across various disciplines. I also audio recorded office hours, as well as interactions outside of the classroom. I've analyzed these recorded interactions to determine to what extent key characteristics of EMI language use are reflected in the listening and speaking tasks found in TOEFL IBT and AUB-EN. Finally, I conducted semi-structured interviews to gauge the perceptions of admissions personnel, university teachers, and students. Today, I'll focus on some preliminary findings from the 8 classes. First, several classes were shown to be highly interactive. These are indicated in pink on the figure. This could be because of the discipline or the teaching style of individuals, but it contrasts with the mostly monolithic nature of several TOEFL and AUB-EN tasks. Another key characteristic is the translanguaging phenomena. In the extract you can see here, the teacher is discussing the castle's name in Hamlet and mentions how El Sinor in Arabic would be the Sinor. Here, he is making a joke referencing the fact that El in Arabic is the preposition the. I'm still analyzing data, but if you'd like to learn more about my emerging results, please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Myriam. Our next presenter is also from Lancaster University, is Santi, and she will again be talking to you about reading into writing tasks.
Hello, my name is Santi Lestari. I'm a PhD student at Lancaster University. My study is on the rating of reading into writing task performances using analytic rating skills. It's been strongly established that reading into writing tasks elicit unique construct that goes beyond knowledge telling into knowledge transformation, as test takers are required to use information from source texts. The evaluation of source use further adds complexity to the already cognitively demanding tasks of rating. Previous studies suggest that analytic rating skills are better at facilitating raters to be more consistent in their marking of source use. However, not all analytic rating skills are the same, especially in the way they represent source use construct. In my study, I'm investigating two different ways. First, source use is operationalized into one specific rating criterion, while the other rating criteria in the rating scale focus on the writing construct. Second, source use is operationalized into some of the rating criteria in the rating scale, sometimes even integrated with the writing construct. The overarching question of my study is then how these different ways might actually impact rating. And specifically, my study seeks to address questions regarding rater consistency and reliability, and also rater cognition. To that end, my project comprises two studies. In study 1, I collected rating data and post-rating questionnaire responses from raters who marked reading into writing performances using the two analytic rating skills. The results from study 1 will be used to address research question 1 on rater consistency and reliability. In study 2, I'll be using a combination of eye tracking and stimulated recall to gather data about rater cognition. The findings will then be used to address research question 2 on rater cognition. I hope my study will contribute to the field at 3 different levels. Theoretically, the findings are expected to advance our understanding of rating skills, rater cognition, and ultimately validity in assessing reading into writing. At the more methodological level, my study will hopefully further demonstrate the usefulness and compatibility of 2 statistical methods from 2 different measurement traditions, and also the combined use of eye tracking and stimulated recall methodology in rater cognition research. At the more practical level, the findings will inform the development of reading into writing skills for both human ratings and automated rating systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Santi, and thank you very much again for all 5 presenters. I will just say it, I think it's a very challenging job to communicate a piece of research, your own research that you know so well, that you've done so much about, in 3 minutes. And I imagine it's also challenging for all of us to actually try and appreciate the work that's being done and all the implications, etc., within 3 minutes. This will be a listening and reading test, presumably, to our UCALTA committee members, who are going to deliberate and identify the best presentation from all the 5 presentations this afternoon. So now we have a few minutes for question and answer. And I guess I can show my video again. The first question is for Emma, our first presenter. So Emma, based on the findings of your study, all the extracts that you've presented to us, does that mean in EAP we should ease off on the questioning of academic integrity around paraphrasing?
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, when we teach paraphrasing, certainly the program I was working on with sort of novice writers, we tend to teach them to sort of faithfully represent the source ideas in their paraphrase, and then possibly to expand on that or to critique it. But what we found, well, what I found in my study is that students were actually going beyond that. So perhaps what we were doing was really insufficient, because there was this instinctive meshing together of the source ideas with their own ideas. So they're naturally progressing already to this discourse synthesis. So in terms of academic integrity with paraphrasing, I think we certainly need to be aware that students are probably doing that anyway, and we need to address it, and I think have discussions around that and be more tolerant, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. I would like to respond, but because we're running out of time, I'll refrain from that. So
That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma. So the next question is for Franz on the double play presentation. Okay, this question is from Victoria. Can double listening in assessment settings be considered authentic and natural?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's actually a common argument for many testing boards who use single play, who say that when you listen to something in real life in an L2, then you also only get one chance at understanding. Now, I'd like to say that just because something is authentic doesn't automatically mean it has construct validity. But at the same time, I'd also like to question this common assumption that single play is more authentic than double play. We've heard a lot today about the new online world we're all living in at the moment. And not only our conferences online, but so is a lot of teaching and learning. Everything is happening in an online environment. And so when students listen to something in an online environment, they of course don't only have the chance to hear something a second time, but they actually have control over the play button, and they can pause and rewind and fast forward. So in that sense, double play may actually even be considered more authentic than single play, although of course not 100% authentic. So yeah, while authenticity is important, construct validity arguably is probably more important, but also double play may actually be more authentic than is commonly assumed.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next question is for our third presenter, Judith. So this question is from Nikki. How much of the factors which raters mentioned in making their decisions are made explicit to the test takers in the test instructions or information?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably not enough, actually. Well, we do have the all the rating scales are publicly available, so that will be quite interesting to see if what they actually talk about is reflected in the rating scales, I guess. It's one of the findings that I'm coming up with is I'm making a list of what test takers should be aware of, but some of it is quite complex. So explaining it to the test takers might actually maybe not be helpful. For example, raters have perceptions about the format of a response. So should it be integrated, the 3 questions be integrated, or should they respond to each question in order? So raters have perceptions about this. Explaining that to a test taker might maybe be a bit complicated, and it's but it is something, that's the plan at the end, to have some information for raters, but also for test takers.
Thank you, Judith. Okay, so the next question is for Myriam. So can you tell us whether you have any preliminary ideas about why some of the classes that you've observed were highly interactive while the others were less interactive?
All right, thank you for the question. Well, so far, what I've thought of is that it might be one of 2 reasons. It might be the personal differences in teaching styles, so that teachers are delivering classes differently, which leads to different levels of interactions. But it could also be the discipline. So the mathematics, biology, and chemistry classes were the ones that were less interactive. That makes them formal and natural sciences. So it might be the disciplines that lead to different levels of interactions in the class. And if anyone has any other suggestions, let me know. But so far, that's what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last question is for Santi. Could you say a little bit more about how you are using eye tracking to investigate rater processes?
All right, thank you for the question. Yes, so the plan is to put the rating scale on the screen. So while the raters are marking and they are consulting the rating scale, their eye movements will be recorded. And after that, the recording of the eye movements will be used as a stimulus in the stimulated recall. So the stimulated recall will be done directly after the raters mark each script. So the plan is, well, I did the pilot study already before COVID, but then I have to wait. It's the main study data collection has been delayed because of the pandemic. In the pilot study, the raters were given 10 scripts. So they did the marking and then the stimulated recall 10 times. But in the main study, I'm considering reducing the number of scripts because I think 10 is probably too many. And I think some of the raters in my pilot study were a bit exhausted doing the marking the 10 scripts. So probably in the main study, I'll do 8. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, thank you very much for all 5 presenters for sharing their research, either work in progress or completed research with us. Sorry that we can't do more question and answer or feedback, but if you are interested in learning more about their research or talking to them about that, I think their information, their names and universities are on the UCALTA website. So you might be able to email them directly, and we might find ways to maybe get their email addresses up there as well so that you can continue the conversation. I'm going to hand back to Linda. Thank you very much.
Daniel, thank you so much. And thank you to the 5 of you who presented and answered questions so professionally this afternoon. And to those who submitted proposals but weren't selected. I know there was a question earlier in the chat about a fear that with more online presentations or online events, the opportunities for presenting would go more to more experienced senior researchers. And I felt very strongly that in this event this afternoon, we really wanted to give a platform to some of our PGR students. And I would like to think that going forward in UCALTA, we could perhaps develop a small community to support PGR students. So look out for that. Maybe we can organize a symposium next year, an event particularly, not just for PGR students to take part in, but for PGR students to present and be received by those of us who've been around a bit long, like me, and to feedback, ask some of the questions. There were lots of great questions. Please do pass on your questions to our presenters this afternoon. It was great. And thank you very much to Daniel, who really prepared and ran this session. As he said, the best of the 5 presentations will receive a prize, which has been generously sponsored by Andrew Bax from Text Inspector, and we will be announcing that just before the end of the afternoon.